The city was alive with the buzz of activity. The sky above was painted in hues of deep blue and bright orange as two suns set behind the distant towers of the alien metropolis. Streets were crowded with beings from all over the galaxy, each speaking in languages the young human had never heard before. The air smelled faintly of strange spices and distant starships. He had only been on this alien world for a few days, and yet it felt like he had already seen more than he ever could have imagined. James Anderson, a regular human who had somehow found himself caught in a galaxy far beyond his understanding, walked through the crowded streets trying to keep his head down. It was one of those days where he felt more like a stranger than ever. The other beings, with their strange faces, blue skin, and tall figures, barely even glanced at him. To them, he was nothing more than another traveler. His original mission had been simple: explore, gather information, and report back to Earth. But now, as he wandered through the marketplace, trying to navigate the maze of brightly colored tents and shops, James was beginning to wonder what he had gotten himself into. The people here seemed to be hiding something, an undercurrent of tension that James couldn't quite place. He turned a corner, hoping to find something familiar, when he saw her. She was standing near the edge of the marketplace, a few meters away, her figure almost hidden behind a row of towering, glowing fruit carts. At first glance, James thought she might be just another alien vendor. But something about the way she held herself was different. Her dark eyes were wide with fear, darting around the bustling crowd as though searching for someone. She didn't belong here, not in this busy, chaotic place where everyone seemed to move with purpose. Her movements were hesitant, as though she didn't want to attract attention, but at the same time, she seemed to be waiting for something, someone. James hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should just keep walking. It wasn't unusual for humans like him to feel like outsiders in this strange city, and he had already attracted enough unwanted attention. But there was something in the way she looked around, a silent cry for help. Without fully understanding why, he found himself drawn toward her. He took a few steps forward, and as if sensing his presence, the alien woman's gaze snapped toward him. She froze for a moment, her eyes locking onto his, and then, as if making a decision in her mind, she quickly walked toward him, her pace quickening. Before he could react, she was right in front of him. "Please, don't let go," she whispered, grabbing his shirt tightly. The force of her grip surprised him, and he felt a strange heat in her touch. Her words were soft, almost as though she feared someone might overhear, but they were full of desperation. James blinked, taken aback. What's going on?" he stammered, unsure of what to say. "Are you all right?" The woman's eyes widened even further. I'm in danger," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the crowded market. "They'll find me. They always find me. Please, I need your help." James felt a surge of sympathy. He wasn't a hero, but there was something in her voice that made it impossible to walk away. Without fully understanding what he was getting into, he nodded. "I'll help. Just tell me what's going on." The woman looked around nervously, her grip on his shirt tightening. "Not here," she said quickly. "Not here. We have to move." James was about to ask more questions when he saw a pair of menacing figures emerging from a nearby alley, their eyes scanning the crowd, their movements deliberate and searching. He didn't need to be told who they were. The woman's reaction confirmed it. Her entire body tensed, and she started to pull him away. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand, feeling the urgent pull of her fear. "Come on, we can get out of here." The woman led him quickly through the crowded marketplace, her steps hurried but graceful. James followed closely, doing his best to keep up with her as they dodged through the crowd. She was fast, navigating the chaos of the market like someone who had done this many times before. The menacing figures behind them didn't give up easily, though, and as they pushed their way through the masses, James could feel the tension growing with every step. "Where are we going?" James asked, trying to keep his voice steady. His heart was pounding now, the adrenaline kicking in. Something wasn't right. The woman was in real danger, and for reasons he didn't yet understand, she had chosen him to help her. "To the alley behind the bar," she replied, her voice tight. There's a door, a hidden entrance. The closer they got to the alley, the more James noticed the woman's unease. Her grip on his hand tightened as they neared their destination. The figures in pursuit were gaining on them, moving faster now that the crowd had started to thin out. He could hear their footsteps behind him, and the sound sent a cold shiver down his spine. "We need to hurry," James urged, glancing over his shoulder. He wasn't sure how much longer they could outrun them. As they reached the alley, the woman moved with a practiced motion, reaching for a hidden panel on the side of a building. She quickly pulled it open, revealing a small metal door. Without waiting for James, she stepped inside. He followed, closing the door behind them just in time. The alley was dark and quiet, and James felt the tension begin to ease slightly. But the moment he looked at the woman again, he realized the gravity of the situation. She was trembling now, her face pale, but her eyes still held that same look of fear. "You shouldn't have helped me," she said, her voice shaky. "They'll come for you now." James stared at her, trying to make sense of the situation. "Who are they? Why are they after you?" The woman took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "My name is Alira," she said quietly. "I'm not from this world. And the people who are chasing me, they want what I carry? Something that could change everything." James didn't understand, but he could see that she was serious. The look in her eyes, the way her body still trembled from the fear, told him she was telling the truth. "Whatever it is, I'll help you," he said, his voice firm. "You're not alone anymore." Illyra met his gaze, and for the first time, a small hint of gratitude crossed her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." "But I'm grateful." James didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The sound of their pursuers' footsteps echoed through the alley, growing louder with each passing second. James could hear their heavy, controlled steps, each one deliberate, as if they knew exactly where to go. Illyra's grip on his arm tightened, and for the first time he noticed how cold her skin felt. She wasn't just frightened, she was terrified. "Are they close?" James whispered, his heart racing in his chest. He didn't know why he felt so connected to her, why helping her felt like his only choice. It was almost as if fate had put them together, and now he was fully committed to whatever danger was about to unfold. "They're always close," Illyra answered quietly, her voice shaky. "They've been hunting me for weeks. I don't know what they want with me, but they won't stop until they get what they need." James glanced over his shoulder again, his eyes scanning the shadows. The narrow alley seemed to stretch endlessly, disappearing into the darkness ahead. They were safe for now, but for how long? "We can't stay here," Illyra said, her voice urgent. She tugged at his arm, guiding him toward a small, hidden door built into the side of an old, crumbling building. It was barely visible in the dim light, but Illyra knew exactly where it was. She had been here before. Without hesitation, James followed her to the door. Illyra pressed a hidden button on the side, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The moment they stepped inside, she pulled it closed behind them with a quick, practiced motion. It locked with a faint click. Inside, the air smelled of damp stone and something metallic. The room was small, dimly lit by a few flickering lights hanging from the ceiling. The walls were lined with old crates and barrels, some of them marked with strange symbols. James couldn't tell if they were meant to be read or just decoration. It was the kind of place that had been forgotten by time. Illyra led him deeper into the room, her movements quick and silent. James followed, trying to keep his own breathing steady. His thoughts were racing, trying to piece together what was happening. Who were these people chasing her? What was it that they wanted? And most importantly, why had he been dragged into this mess? "We need to hide for a while," Illyra whispered, stopping in front of a small metal hatch in the floor. "This is the only way out. It leads to an underground tunnel system, one that's been forgotten for centuries." James raised an eyebrow. "Underground tunnels? Are we really going to hide down there?" Illyra nodded quickly. "It's the safest option right now. The tunnels lead out of the city. We'll be able to move undetected if we're careful." James was about to ask more questions when the sound of footsteps reached his ears, slow and methodical, the unmistakable sound of someone approaching. His heart skipped a beat. "They're here," Alira whispered urgently, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to move now." James didn't need any more prompting. Alira moved to the hatch and pulled it open, revealing a narrow, dark passage. Below, she gestured for James to go first. "After you," James said, trying to keep his tone calm. Alira didn't hesitate. She quickly climbed down into the tunnel, and James followed closely behind. The hatch closed with a soft clang behind them, sealing off the world above. The air was cool and damp down here, the walls of the tunnel made of smooth stone that seemed ancient. Worn by time but still strong, they moved quickly through the dark, Alira taking the lead with confidence, while James followed, unsure of what was ahead. The tunnel twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense, as if it had been built without any clear direction. But Alira seemed to know where she was going, her pace never faltering as they walked. James couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to this point. What kind of secrets did she carry that were so important, so dangerous? And who were the people chasing her? They seemed more like hunters than mere enemies. "You said they've been chasing you for weeks," James said, trying to keep the conversation going. "Why? What do they want?" Alira didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be thinking, her eyes focused on the dark path ahead. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want the code," she said. "The key to something ... something ancient. Something that can change everything." James blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "A code? What kind of code?" Alira shook her head. "I don't know. All I know is that it's hidden inside me, and it's something they'll stop at nothing to get. They've been after it for years, and now they've found me." James' mind was racing. He didn't understand what she meant, but he could feel the weight of her words. This wasn't just a simple chase. This was something bigger, something that had the potential to shake the very foundation of everything he knew. "What kind of people are they?" James asked, his voice tense with curiosity. "They're mercenaries," Alira replied. "Trained killers working for the highest bidder. They have no loyalty, no morality. They'll do anything to get what they want." James couldn't imagine the kind of danger Alira had been facing. It was hard for him to grasp just how far-reaching her situation was, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. The sound of footsteps up above made him pause, his senses on high. Alert, the mercenaries were getting closer. "We have to hurry," James said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "What now?" Alira's face was set in determination. "We keep going, we can't stop. The tunnels will lead us to an old transport station, one that's still operational. It's our only way out." James didn't question her. He trusted her, even though he didn't fully understand what was going on. He just hoped they could make it out of here alive. They continued down the tunnel, the air growing colder as they ventured deeper. Every few steps, James glanced over his shoulder, feeling the heavy weight of the mercenaries' pursuit. He had no idea how close they were, but the closer they got, the more anxious he became. After what felt like an eternity, Alira finally stopped. She turned to face James, her expression unreadable. "This is it," she said. "We'll have to climb through a ventilation shaft to reach the station. It's small, but it's our only option." James nodded, his heart pounding. "Lead the way." Alira moved to a wall and pressed a hidden panel, revealing a small, round opening. She gestured for James to go first. As James climbed through the ventilation shaft, his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. He didn't know how much longer they could keep running. The mercenaries were relentless, and Alira was running out of time. But he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to leave her behind. Not now, not ever. The tunnels felt endless, the walls closing in on them as they crawled through the narrow, dimly lit passage. James' heart pounded with every step, and the sound of his breath echoed through the cold air. Alira was leading him through this labyrinth with a confidence that both amazed and worried him. She knew these tunnels, knew where every twist and turn would lead, but James couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The sound of pursuit was still distant but growing steadily closer. He glanced over his shoulder. The tension building in his chest. "What now?" James asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though he could feel the urgency in his every word. He had no idea how much farther they could go before they were cornered. "We're almost there," Illyra replied, her voice calm despite the danger surrounding them. "The station is just ahead." James nodded, trying to ignore the cold sweat that had begun to form on his forehead. He didn't know if he could keep up this pace for much longer. His muscles were sore from the crawling, and the cramped tunnel made it hard to breathe properly. But he pushed on, knowing there was no turning back now. He had committed himself to this, and he wasn't about to stop. Not when Illyra needed him. Suddenly, Illyra stopped, her hand shooting up to signal for him to halt. James almost ran into her, but he managed to stop just in time. She looked ahead, her sharp eyes scanning the path in front of them. James followed her gaze but saw nothing, just more stone walls and shadows. The silence in the tunnel was deafening. "They're close," Illyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to move faster." Before James could respond, a low, guttural voice echoed through the tunnel. It was distant but unmistakable. The mercenaries were near. They had found the entrance to the tunnels, and now there was nowhere to hide. They would be on them in moments. Illyra's face hardened. "We can't risk being cornered down here. Follow me." She turned sharply to the right, leading him into an even narrower passage. James followed closely, trying to keep up with her. They moved quickly, their footsteps almost silent in the stone corridor. The air grew even colder as they reached a large metal door at the end of the passage. It was old, rusted, but still intact. "This is it," Illyra said, her fingers working quickly to unlock the door. She pulled out a small device from her pocket and attached it to the door's control panel. The device emitted a soft beep, and the door slowly slid open with a metallic groan. James followed her inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim lighting. The room was small but filled with old equipment crates, wires, and various alien technology scattered around. It looked like a forgotten storage room, one that had been abandoned long ago. But to Illyra it was the doorway to freedom. She hurried to the far corner of the room and pressed another hidden panel. A small hatch opened in the floor, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the shadows. Illyra looked over her shoulder at James, her expression grave. "This leads to the transport station," she said. "It's the only way out." James hesitated. He could hear the mercenaries getting closer, their voices growing louder with each passing second. They had no time to waste. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, but he didn't have a choice. He followed Illyra down the stairs, the hatch closing behind them with a soft thud. The staircase was steep, and James felt the air growing colder the further they descended. It was like walking into the depths of a forgotten world. The walls of the tunnel were lined with old pipes and wires, and the smell of dust and decay was thick in the air. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps as they made their way. Deeper underground, Illyra didn't speak as they walked, her face set in determination. James could feel the tension radiating off her. He didn't know what was going through her mind, but he could tell she was just as scared as he was. The mercenaries weren't just chasing her, they were hunting her. And whatever secret she carried, it was important enough for them to stop at nothing to get it. After what felt like hours, they reached the bottom of the staircase. Illyra pushed open another door, revealing a small, dimly lit room filled with old machinery. At the far end of the room, a transport ship sat waiting. It was small, no larger than a shuttle, but it was their only hope. James could feel his heart race as he took in the sight of it. "Are you sure this thing still works?" he asked, eyeing the ship warily. It looked old, like it had been abandoned for a long time, but Illyra didn't hesitate. She walked over to the ship's control panel and began typing in commands, her fingers moving with precision. "It'll work," she said without looking up. "It was built to last. I just need to power it up." James watched as she worked, his thoughts racing. They were so close now, so close to escaping. But he knew the mercenaries wouldn't give up that easily. They were relentless. And even if they made it to the ship, would they be able to outrun their pursuers? Would they be able to leave this world behind? He didn't have an answer. But as he stood there watching Illyra, he realized something. He had promised her that he wouldn't let go, that he would help her. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to leave her behind. Not now. Not ever. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. James's heart skipped a beat. The mercenaries were here. They had found them. Illyra looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "We don't have much time. Get in." Without waiting for him to respond, she climbed into the ship's cockpit, flipping switches and pressing buttons with practiced ease. James hesitated for a moment, his heart racing, but then he followed her. He quickly strapped himself into one of the seats as Illyra started the ship's engines. The hum of the engine filled the room as the ship slowly powered up. "Hold on," Illyra said, her voice steady despite the danger. She pulled back on the controls, and the ship slowly lifted. Off the ground. James looked out the window, watching as the tunnel entrance grew smaller and smaller. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind them, but it was too late. They were already moving, already escaping. Illyra had done it. She had gotten them out of the tunnels. For the first time since this all began, James allowed himself to relax. They were safe. For now, but deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The small transport ship jolted slightly as Illyra maneuvered it through the old underground docking station. The hum of the engines grew louder, and the dim lights of the tunnel walls flickered by in a blur. James strapped himself tightly into the seat next to her, his hands gripping the armrests, his body tense from the constant rush of adrenaline. "Are you sure this is going to work?" James asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. The ship wasn't built for a fast getaway, and Illyra's quick hands worked skillfully at the controls. But would it be enough? The sound of boots echoing behind them in the tunnels reminded him that the mercenaries were not far behind. Illyra's eyes remained focused on the control panel, her hands moving with practiced ease. "We don't have much of a choice, James," she replied, her voice calm despite the situation. "This ship may be old, but it's still functional. Just hold on." The ship surged forward, and James could feel the weight of the acceleration push him back into his seat. His heart raced as the tunnel's walls disappeared behind them, replaced by the cold expanse of space visible through the small windows. He couldn't help but feel a rush of awe at the sight. The blackness of space stretched endlessly, dotted with distant stars that twinkled in the vast distance. But there was no time to marvel at the beauty of the stars. The ship was still vulnerable, and the mercenaries were no doubt closing in. Illyra had said they were the best hunters in the galaxy, and they didn't let anyone slip away easily. He couldn't help but wonder if they would be able to escape their pursuers. Would they make it out alive? "We need to get past the stations." "Defense grid," Illyra muttered to herself, her fingers flying over the controls. She turned to James for a moment, her face serious. "I'm going to have to make a quick jump into open space. If we don't make it, we'll be sitting ducks." James nodded, his breath held in his chest. "Do what you need to do. Just get us out of here." Illyra's lips curved into a tight smile. "Hold on tight." With a sudden jolt, the ship shot forward, its engines roaring to life. The stars outside the window stretched as the ship gained speed, racing toward the edge of the station's orbit. The sound of the engines pulsed in James's ears, and the vibrations beneath him were intense. The speed was unlike anything he had ever felt before, and for a moment the world around him felt like it was closing in. He shut his eyes, focusing on breathing steadily. The ship lurched violently, and James's eyes snapped open. Through the small window, he saw the station's defenses, a barrier of laser grids meant to stop anyone from escaping. Illyra didn't hesitate. She punched in a series of codes, and the ship jolted again, darting through the laser grids with a narrow escape. The light show outside was a flash of blue and red as the lasers fired all around them. James gritted his teeth, feeling his stomach twist with each near miss. They were almost there. Almost free, the ship shot past the final layer of defenses and broke into the vastness of open space. James let out a breath he didn't even know he was holding. "We made it," Illyra said softly, her voice almost a whisper of relief. But her expression didn't change. She remained focused, her hands still gripping the controls as she guided the ship further into deep space. James took a moment to process what had just happened. His heart was still pounding, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. They had escaped the station and its defense grid. For now they were free, but that didn't mean they were safe. The mercenaries wouldn't give up easily. And the strange code that Illyra carried, it was still out there, waiting to be claimed. James looked over at her, his mind racing with questions. "What exactly is this code you're talking about?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "Why are they hunting you so relentlessly for it?" Illyra sighed, her eyes distant as she stared at the stars. "I don't know all the details," she admitted. "I just know it's part of something much bigger, something ancient. It's connected to the old war that destroyed my home planet." James blinked, trying to absorb her words. "A war?" "Your home planet was destroyed?" Illyra nodded slowly. "It wasn't just any war. It was a war between ancient civilizations, ones that were far more advanced than anything we have now. They fought over control of something powerful, something that could reshape the galaxy. And now, that power is locked away, hidden in the form of this code." James could hear the weight in her voice, the pain behind her words. Whatever this was, it was far beyond anything he could have imagined. He thought of his simple life back on Earth, his work at the research station, and how all of that had been ripped away. Now he was tangled in something that spanned the stars, something far bigger than himself. "Why you, though?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What makes you the key to all of this?" Illyra turned to look at him, her eyes dark with uncertainty. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I've been running ever since. And now ... now they're closing in." James frowned, his mind reeling. "So, these mercenaries, they work for someone else? Someone who wants this code?" "Yes," Illyra said, her voice tight. "They don't work alone. They're part of a larger faction, one that wants to control the ancient technology hidden in the code. Whoever controls it will have power beyond anything we've ever known. And that's why they won't stop until they get it." James looked out the window at the vast, empty void of space. The stars seemed so far away, yet they felt so close, like they were right on the edge of something monumental. "We need to find somewhere safe," Illyra said, breaking the silence. "We can't keep running forever." James turned back to her, his mind made up. "We'll find a way. We'll get you to safety." Illyra gave him a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you're right, James. I hope we have enough time." The ship continued to sail through the stars, leaving the station and the danger far behind. But James knew this was just the beginning. They had made it out, but the road ahead was still filled with uncertainty. And as much as he wanted to believe they would find safety, something told him that the real challenge was just beginning. The stars were silent witnesses to their flight. Illyra had taken them deep into space, away from the planet and its dangers, but the silence that filled the ship felt hollow. James sat quietly next to her, watching as the black expanse of space stretched before them, dotted only by the faint glimmer of distant stars. He had never imagined that one day he would be out here, running for his life across the galaxy. Yet here they were, far from Earth and anything familiar, caught up in a mystery neither of them fully understood. Illyra remained focused on the control panel, her fingers brushing lightly over the ship's interface. She had been quiet for most of the journey, her face tense, as though every passing second brought the danger closer. James couldn't blame her. Even after escaping the mercenaries, the real battle had only just begun. They were far from being out of danger. "How far are we from the nearest safe zone?" James asked, breaking the silence that had hung heavy in the air. Illyra's eyes flickered to the readouts before her. A few light years," she said quietly. "But we can't risk going to a known safe zone. They'll be expecting us there. We need to find somewhere isolated, somewhere off the grid." James nodded, understanding the urgency. The people chasing Illyra wouldn't stop at anything to get the code, and the more they ran, the more they became targets. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about both of them. He couldn't help but wonder if his life would ever return to the simplicity it had once been. The thought of his life back on Earth, of his family and friends, felt like it belonged to another person now. Where exactly are we going? James asked, trying to focus on something other than the uncertainty in his mind. Elira hesitated, her fingers hovering over the controls. I don't know, she admitted, her voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. I've never been to this part of space before. All I know is we need to find a place where we can lay low for a while. I'll figure out the rest when we get there. James could sense her exhaustion, both physical and emotional. It was as though the weight of her past was slowly crushing her, the burden of what she carried growing heavier with each passing moment. He knew that part of the reason she kept so much to herself was because of the danger, but he also saw the struggle in her eyes, the conflict between wanting to trust him and needing to protect herself. Listen, James said, his voice gentle, but firm. We're in this together, okay? I may not understand everything that's going on, but I know one thing, we're not doing this alone. You're not alone. Elira glanced at him, her eyes softening for a moment. It was a fleeting look, but it spoke volumes. She didn't say anything at first, just returned her gaze to the controls, her face once again set in determination. Thank you, she whispered, almost too quietly for him to hear. James smiled faintly. Anytime. The silence stretched between them again, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. There was an unspoken understanding now, a bond forged in the fire of their shared escape. He wasn't just some random stranger who had happened to walk by at the wrong time. He had chosen to help her, and in doing so, he had stepped into something far bigger than himself. But as much as the uncertainty of it all weighed on him, he knew there was no turning back. Elara's voice broke the silence once more. I don't know what happens next, but I promise you this, we'll get through it, I'll make sure of it. Her words were soft, but there was an edge of conviction in them, something that made James believe her. Despite all the danger, despite all the uncertainty, Elira had something inside her that was unbreakable. And for the first time since he had stepped into this strange, dangerous galaxy, he felt like they stood a chance. James leaned back in his seat, feeling the hum of the ship beneath him. He was far from being an expert on space travel, but he could tell that the ship was holding steady. Elira knew what she was doing, and he trusted her. It was strange, this feeling of trust. He had only known her for a few days, but something about her had connected with him. She was strong, capable, and she didn't shy away from danger. She had already shown him that she was willing to do whatever it took to survive. And that made James want to fight alongside her. Elira glanced over at him once more, her eyes scanning his face as if weighing his thoughts. You don't have to stay with me, she said, her voice low. I never asked you to risk your life. James shook his head. I'm not leaving you, not now, not after everything that's happened. Besides, you didn't exactly give me a choice. Elira's lips quirked upward in a brief smile. You could have walked away. Maybe, James replied, but I didn't, and you didn't ask, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment they sat in silence, the ship gliding through the stars. The quiet was different now, less filled with tension and more with something else. Something softer, more genuine. A connection. Elira turned back to the controls, her face once again unreadable. I just wish I knew what the code really was. Why it's so important, why they're hunting me for it. She paused, her eyes filled with a mix of frustration and sadness. But every time I get close to understanding, it slips away. James nodded, understanding her frustration. Maybe you don't need to understand it all right now. We can figure it out together, step by step. But the most important thing is staying safe. You can't help anyone if you're not alive. Elira's eyes flicked to him for a moment, and for the first time, James saw a flicker of relief in her gaze. The weight she had been carrying seemed to lighten, even if just for a moment. You're right. I've been so focused on the past, I haven't thought enough about the present. Let's focus on now, James said, leaning forward slightly. One step at a time. Elira smiled, a small, genuine smile. All right, one step at a time. James knew that their journey wasn't going to be easy. There would be dangers, uncertainties, and moments where they would question whether they could keep going. But in that moment, sitting side by side with Elira, he felt something deep within him, a promise. A promise to stay by her side, no matter what came next. Because this wasn't just about surviving. It was about trust, about standing together. In the face of the unknown, and no matter where the stars led them, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let go.